listening to this podcast on Apple, Spotify, or any of your favorite podcast platforms, let us invite you to join the live interactive recording most Wednesday nights at 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific on the Evangelicalish YouTube channel. And also please check out the Dish community at evangelicalish.com. You can find extra content, private Zoom groups, and pick up the latest piece of merch. That's all at evangelicalish.com. And stay current on his updates on Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook at Evangelicalish. That's Evangelical and Lish. Now to the false prophet, the beast, and the Antichrist. Not just kidding, sort of, with Paul, Jeremy, and April on this episode of Evangelicalish.
Welcome into Evangelicalish. It is good to see everyone this evening. I'm Jeremy.
I'm April.
I'm Paul.
And it is you guys right there together. That was great. Man, good to see everybody. Glad that y'all are with us on the live recording. This is taped in front of a live studio audience every single week. So don't hesitate to come join us. If you are a podcast listener, hop on over to the YouTube channel. It's just youtube.com/evangelicalish, and you can watch live on Wednesday nights, and you too can join in the conversation. And you can join the Ish community, evangelicalish.com. You go there and join the behind the scenes community. It's really great. You get some behind the scenes content, behind the scenes chat boards. And then folks on our top 2 levels even get to do a Zoom with us once every couple of months. So it is just a really great opportunity for you to connect with the community a little bit more and to connect with myself and April and Paul. So excited to have everybody with us tonight. So do us a favor, like, comment, subscribe if you haven't done that already, and join the Ish community.
Yay. And we have a really awesome guest tonight.
That was such a hard transition. Sorry.
I know. It was just, you just stopped. So I was like, oh, my turn. Dara Starr Tucker, if you're on TikTok or Instagram, on YouTube, she is a singer-songwriter. But she also makes content about race and social issues and has a lot of really awesome commentary about historical random things and songs. And I feel like you've talked about the history of random brands and their logos and Sesame Street and just so many things. I learned so much really interesting random facts that would be perfect in trivia, I feel like, from your content. So welcome, Dara.
Thank you, April and Paul and Jeremy. I'm glad to be here.
Yay.
Yes.
Yeah, we are super super excited to have you. You love some of the things that I certainly love as well. Fun history or interesting history, maybe not always fun, but interesting history, interesting music facts, and so definitely a fan of your content for sure.
Thank you.
And we have a demonstration that we can show if we want to show a video. So let's watch.
Of watching Sesame Street in its early days, there's something you may remember about it that younger generations may not. It was really black. From the jive talk,
In Majesty, dig it, I can write anything.
to the soul and funk music, to the set and cast, Sesame Street seemed to have a very specific demographic in mind: black and brown inner city kids. Well, did you know that those kids were the whole reason that Sesame Street was created in the first place?
Our target audience were inner city children, and the bullseye of the target audience were inner city Black children.
I'm Dara Starr Tucker, and this is The Breakdown. Sesame Street, which premiered in 1969, was unlike any show that had come before it. It was one of the original shows to appear on the fledgling PBS network. Children's television up to that point was essentially an electronic babysitter, and a questionable one at that. Young viewers were a prime target for advertisers who wanted to sell candy, toys, cereal, you name it, to a willing audience. They were barraged with cartoons, clown shows, and afternoon serials that had little redeeming value. Studies indicated that children were spending half their day in front of the TV. But it was even worse for Black and brown inner city children. Their parents often had jobs that required them to be away for large swaths of time. They were often being exposed to mindless programming at a higher rate than their middle-class counterparts. Enter Lloyd Morissette. He's widely regarded as the father of Sesame Street. Lloyd had graduated with a PhD in experimental psychology from Yale University. He had excelled in the field of education and later became the vice president of the Carnegie Corporation, where he began to develop a special interest in children's education, particularly the disparities between middle-class children and Black and brown children in the inner city. Through the Carnegie Corporation's research, they found that inner city children started out months behind middle-class children in kindergarten, and the gap grew wider and wider as they advanced through later grades. Morissette wanted to figure out.
All right, I'm going to stop there just because I want to hear from Dara, but that was fantastic.
Yeah, I love that, and I love the learning that we get to do with you on that. That's fantastic.
Thank you.
I did not know before your video that was the history of Sesame Street. What year did Sesame Street start?
It would have been in 1969.
69, it said. So where do you
Before my
find
time.
this information? How do you find all this stuff out? Are you just super, super smart?
No, I'm a curious person. That particular video, I had heard a bit of that history, but then I ended up watching a documentary, which I put the little graphic on the video itself. And in the comments, I attempted to direct people to a documentary on HBO called Street Gang, where a lot of the footage that I used came from. And so they really broke that down and got into the history of it in that documentary. So that was one of the rare ones where I was really able to just kind of pull from something that had already been presented and just do a super truncated, like punchy version of it and put my personality and commentary into it.
How long does it take you to make one of those?
Yeah.
Oh, it can completely depend. If you have watched a lot of my content, you know, those videos can range anywhere from 1.5 minutes to the one I put out today was 10 minutes. And so if I'm working on one like Sesame Street, I think that one ended up being maybe 5.5 minutes or something like that. They are a lot of work. I'm going to probably spend a good 16 to 20 hours on something like that, from writing it, scripting it, to filming, to the editing and just all the polishing finishes, probably a couple of days of work, solid days of work.
And then you also include so much like actual footage of what you're talking about too.
Right.
Which that takes time to find all of that.
Yeah, it can be a lot. And depending on what the subject is, it's great when you have a documentary as your source material, but that usually is not the case. So like with the one I put out today, which was about the song Killing Me Softly, there is no source material. It's completely random. I'm just looking at various places on, YouTube and different spots where I can find information. So it's a lot of digging. So that one, being that it was 10 minutes, that one took me, it was probably a good 3 days to work on.
Wow.
So, how do you, with a platform like TikTok, they want you putting out content almost daily, really, and they say probably more than once daily, although most of us don't have time for that. But how do you kind of combat those algorithm challenges, or have you run into any issues like that? Is YouTube a better platform, kind of just for your style?
Yeah, I think so. And I'm slowly shifting to more of a focus on YouTube, especially now that I'm kind of leaning into more in-depth, like longer form content. I think it's probably been time for a long time. I think I'm just I'm charging towards that like symbolic victory of hitting 1 million on TikTok, for what it's even worth at this point, because Lord knows if they're even going to be around much longer for us. But I'm in the low 900,000s over there. So I think I just want to cross that mark. And I really hope I am able to do that. I think I've got to come up with some red meat. What do they call it? Some chum to throw in the waters. I know
to stir up.
People stirred up.
Well, and I think we would be a little bit remiss if we didn't at least say that it seems like the government and the people around it are wanting to quickly do something about TikTok, address it, ban it. There's so many different options on the table. But yet we continue to just send thoughts and prayers out to places like Nashville, Tennessee, who experienced a horrific tragedy inside their schools yesterday. I certainly don't want us to miss that this evening at all. And, it's sad that, it just kind of helps put real life in perspective, I think, a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's I spent almost 15 years in Nashville, about 13 years, I think, in Nashville. So it's a city that's near and dear to my heart. I just moved away 3 years ago. And so, it's unfortunately, it's one of those towns that is run by a lot of folks who really feel that thoughts and prayers is the primary thing that should be offered at a time like this. It was a really infuriating thing to listen to as one of the state senators who was on film saying, well, there's just nothing we can do about it. We just have to accept there's nothing we can do about it. And, I was raised by a daddy who told me that, if folks want to do something bad, they're just going to find a way to do it. And then he ended his statement by saying, I'm a big believer in God, and I just feel like what we need is revival. We need a revival in the land. And this kind of thing is going to change until people's hearts change. And if I had time today, because I interviewed someone from my own podcast today, so I was kind of out of it, but I really wanted to do a response video to that and people who espouse that kind of thinking, because I think it's just so easy to present that sort of fatalist view where there's nothing we can do. This is all about, what's going on in people's hearts. And really the answer is that everybody needs Jesus. And, until they accept that he's the one and true living God, then none of it's going to change. And then, they literally just go on with their lives. I have so much to say in response to that.
Yeah.
I think I just need to sit down and really organize my thoughts rather than just firing off and doing some sort of, hot take about it. Because
I did the firing off today.
That's fine. It's totally fine. But I'm just, but it's so maddening. It's just absolutely maddening because it's so pointless. And, that's definitely not their attitude about transgender people, doing anything. It's like, no, I hate what you're doing. And so therefore I'm going to take this action in order to stop you from doing it. So it's definitely not a universal approach. It's very selective in terms of what they decide to not be outraged about and simply chalk up to, we all need Jesus.
And I think the same Tennessee elected official that you were talking about, I think he's the same one. Someone did a mashup and compared what he had said about drag queens.
Right.
And on drag queens, he was like, that's not something that we put up here,
Right.
put up with here in Tennessee.
We don't take that crap in Tennessee. Right.
Yeah, we don't take that. We will stop that. Da, da, da. And then on shootings in schools, they're like, well, nothing we can do.
Yeah.
If you saw Jon Stewart's interview with the guy from Oklahoma the other day, it was, he's like, we have to pass laws against drag shows because we have to protect children.
Yeah.
But with guns, we can't do anything. One of the reasons I love having TikTok in my life is I forced myself to watch the videos of the body cam videos and the CCTV in the school. And I'm still so enraged. And so I didn't think like I'm not a thoughtful person like you, Dara. I shot one off and just said, how many kids have to die? How many children die before we do something? And what is it about the gun? And you're right, it's maddening for people. Well, it's a heart issue and it's evil. And I'm like, well, apparently we have way more heart issues in America than every other wealthy country in the world. And why is it?
Yes.
So then let's address why our hearts are so evil when we're so Christian. Why is it that Christian white men do almost all this shooting? It's crazy.
That is so valid. And I also think, you hear so many of these guys out crying for, it's the hearts of men. We need revival, and all this stuff. And it's like, but y'all can't even agree on what revival is. The whole thing happened at Asbury College or whatever. And it was like, we all just stepped back and watched as the evangelicals just pummeled each other about whether it was a real revival or not. Like they can't even decide what revival is. And so, I'm sorry, just like if you can sit through 13 school shootings just this year, which by the way is more than any other major developed country in the world in the last like 25 years, right? Like the United States leads by a landslide in school shootings, and it's not even close. The next 20 countries combined don't stack up to our total. Mm-hmm. And so at some point, like, I'm sorry, but kind of fuck you. Like, I'm tired of hearing your nonsense. I'm tired of hearing your excuses. I don't want your thoughts and prayers anymore. Our kids are scared. Like they are at school every single day thinking, oh, I wonder if it's going to be us today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know, I was talking to my librarian at the school that I, well, we're here now at the school that I work at. Yeah, exactly. And so I was chatting with her and she goes, you know, I come to work every day afraid, she said, especially on days like today after another school shooting, because how many of them happen in the library? You know, she's scared to death. She's scared to death. She doesn't know how to protect her kids. And so it's just devastating. Especially when you work in that education space, and it's devastating for everyone. I don't want to take that from anybody with a heart. It hurts, but my goodness, like when is enough?
Yeah. And then also because of this most recent shooter's identity, there's just a slew of anti-trans, and which there already was a lot of hate towards the trans community, but now even more so. And I've seen a lot of people claiming that this was like an intentional like persecution of Christians, since it was a Christian school.
Of course.
But I saw a tweet and it was a good reminder of like Fox News is running these headlines that it's, you know, it was targeted at Christians specifically, to push the persecution narrative. But they weren't running those headlines when Dylan Roof shot a black church.
No,
it wasn't Christian persecution then.
No, they were trumpeting headlines about like, you know, why does everybody have to make everything about race?
Yeah, like, well, and when it's like the cisgender white male, sometimes with Christian background, a lot of them have it. It's this, it's just a one-off. It's a mental health issue. It's an individual problem. It's a sin problem. But if it's a trans person, it's the whole community is violent. It's like, no.
Well, over the last 2,000 mass shootings in the United States, or, you know, I guess however we have to have statistics for this now, I guess, you know, shootings that kill or wound like more than 4 people. Out of all of those shootings, only 3 of them have been done by either non-binary or transgender individuals, and all the rest of those couple thousand have been done by cisgender heterosexual white men. I mean, there's no story here. I mean, they're just drumming up the hate they want to drum up. But
well, I would say a few hundred more shootings by a trans person, and the trans community will be in the zip code of the people killed by the white cishet Christian man.
Yeah.
So
yeah, that's right.
That's where we are. And so I think Dara, sometimes, and certainly a lot of things going on in our community today, we have to sort of offload our anger a little bit. And also, I love that you do this through teaching. And I don't know, does that work for you sometimes to get some of this frustration of what you have to face or where you see injustice and be able to put it into an educational video?
Yeah, I mean, that's the whole reason I started doing what I do. I mean, it was right around the election of 2020 that I really ramped up and started to use my voice, which I had, you know, very much been taught as an obedient, you know, Southern Black church girl. Like, you don't do that. You're not allowed to do that for a whole lot of reasons. And so I was ready to just explode. I just was like, well, you know, it's one thing to do music because that's my first occupation. And the thing that's dearest to my heart. But it's like, well, I can't wait 2 years to put out an album to be able to say what I want to say. You know, I need to be able to speak. I don't need to be limited to simply being a musician. And because I'm so concerned about, you know, letting people down or disappointing people, or what are they going to think? And, you know, so yeah, I surprised a lot of people, I think, when I pivoted online and just started you know, I just kind of started vomiting all over my socials, just like whether it was through satire, skits and things, or, you know, a few little hot takes here and there, or pre-planned videos that were more scripted. Yeah, I began to shout in 2020 after George Floyd and after Breonna Taylor and after 4 years of putting up with what we had put up with politically. And then the craziness and the insanity around the election. And then January 6th, and it was just so much. And I thought, well, who is being served by my silence? Who is, it's not me. It's not the disenfranchised. It's not the people who need someone to speak out for them. And I know I've always been a pretty good writer. I've always been able to express myself pretty well with words. And I've had to get accustomed to being on camera, but it was something I was getting more accustomed to at that time. So I'm like, who am I serving with my silence? I'm serving the people who are doing harm. I'm serving the people who are doing evil in the world.
Yes.
That is who is being served by me remaining silent. So that was my kind of clarion call. It was like, buck up, you know, put on your big girl panties and begin to speak, because this silent act you're doing right now is self-protective, and it is a reflection of my inability to withstand judgment, the judgment that I knew would come from it, from my church community, from my parents' friends, from my, to be frank, from my white friends, and many of whom I just had a pretty voracious back and forth yesterday from a friend of mine, a church friend of mine, a white guy who we have been friends for a really long time, but he's got a lot to say and he wants to straighten me out on some things. And, you know, there's some folks who are really disappointed with me, but it's my job to be able to, it's my job to learn how to withstand that and stand in what I know I'm supposed to be doing. So I can handle disappointing some people.
It reminds me, guys, of last week, Brian McLaren saying, if you're going to stay Christian, because he's asking the question, do I stay Christian? Yes. If you're going to stay Christian, you cannot stay silent anymore. And it seems that way, Dara. It seems like the fence is gone for us to sit on now. We got to declare a side anymore.
Yeah. I think, you know, people will guilt you about, you know, oh, well, this is, what's the word I'm thinking of? You know, this is where's the unity? Divisive. They love that word, divisive. And I'm like, well, if I came to a Klan rally and said, Black Lives Matter, that's divisive too. But I don't really care. We have to decide who we're okay with disappointing, you know, because yeah, there really are in most of these cases, being so worried about being even-handed and not offending certain people. It's really a reflection. It's a reflection of our values, whether we want to admit that or not. So this is the age of everyone potentially having a voice, and the people who are probably the least researched and the least studied are seemingly the most eager to make their voices heard. So I'm like, those of us who are, it's just kind of a weird paradox, because those of us like you all who are much more thoughtful and, you know, measured about your approach to things, we're probably more likely to put the reins on and, you know, as I was saying, not be the one to just fire off and pop off in emotion. But that can be really harmful, because then you just leave, there's a void there. And now we're just allowing the most, you know, the lowest common denominator, whatever, to speak for us. And so we have to be willing to use our voices. We do. And, you know, particularly someone like me who comes from I'm just at the cross section and the intersection of so many things, so many identities and so many experiences. And so I think I can provide a perspective, and that not a lot of people can. And I think what I have to remind myself of is that people, it isn't so much about, it isn't so much about me being, saying the wrong thing. If people express anger or frustration or disappointment or there's all kinds of reactions that people have to you speaking out. It really isn't about you. It's really more about them and what your voice means for them, wherever they are in their life. You're gonna rile something up. Either they're gonna get excited about it and they're gonna be in, agreement and cheering you on, or it's gonna spark something that they don't want touched. And so if anger is their response, if they're, immediately they just want to straighten you out on it. I when I was younger, I think I would internalize that. That was just my way. And I don't know if it was because I was raised in the church, if I was raised, as a woman or as a Black person or whatever, but I would always internalize that. Well, if they, oh my goodness, they're disappointed with me, or they had a problem with what I said. So, it must be me, and I've got to figure out how to correct this. And so now my stance is more so like, don't be afraid to let people down. And, even having that conversation with my friend yesterday over text, it was like, I was very declarative in my response to him. It's like, yeah, I can hear that you're disappointed in some of what you've heard me say. And I don't know what it is that's disappointing you, but you have to realize I speak the way I do about these issues very purposefully. And if I am not always in this bridge building kumbaya place, it's for a reason. Because I watched my father and my mother, who were ministers, I watched them take that approach, and they had to for their own survival and for their own, advancement or whatever. But that's, they walked that walk so that I didn't have to. And I do not plan to take that approach, because I've seen what it leads to. And it leads to a lot of frustration. It leads to a lot of disappointment in life. And it leads to you being surrounded by people who cannot really handle who you actually are. And I watched my father towards the end of his life really, just get to a place of isolation, because he had to wall himself off from people because he was surrounded. He passed away in 2014. So that would have been who was president in 2014?
Obama.
Was it still Obama?
Yeah, until 2016.
He was raised in, the Pentecostal Holiness Church, a Black church. His mother was a pastor, Pentecostal Holiness pastor. He kind of moved away from that and became a part of the Evangelical church. And there was a white pastor in Tulsa, Oklahoma, named Buddy Harrison, who said, I want my church to be mixed. I don't want to have just a white church. It was a very admirable thing for him to do. This was the late 70s. And so he brought my father in to be his music minister, to sort of diversify the church. And he said he wanted a great music program. So that's when we, started to come along, and we were raised up in that. So partly in the Pentecostal holiness world, partly in the evangelical kind of word of faith, charismatic, non-denominational world that my father became a part of. And so, there was a lot of acquiescing that we witnessed growing up. It was a very, like I said, just living at the intersection of a whole lot of roads going in a whole lot of different directions. And so it really gave me and my brothers and sisters, I have 6 brothers and sisters, and it gave us all a pretty unique perspective on race and culture and church and, all sorts of things. But, I watched the decisions that he had to make in order to be a Black man in a predominantly white church environment. And he did what he had to do. A lot of it was survival, and a lot of it was him coming away from the experience that he knew, which was, just dusty floors and a piano that's 50 years old and is out of tune, and 50 congregation members and all of this stuff, and then coming into this really, this mega church type environment. It was admirable what he was able to accomplish, but it was also soul crushing.
Was he still part of the evangelical church when he passed? Like up until that point?
He really went through a little bit of a transformation towards the end. Like I said, it created an isolation in him. He was, in fellowship with a lot of these pastor friends of his. When Obama came into office,
And he said he would attend prayer meetings where they were literally praying for the destruction of
Yes.
Barack Obama. They would pray that, Lord, just take him out, remove him. And I think he began to be really disillusioned at that point. I mean, he had seen enough already, but it was like when that happened, I think that it just severed something in him. And so he ended up really just sort of breaking away and telling us that he really didn't want to, he just was burned out on ministry. So by the time he passed away in 2014, he was not really doing a lot of ministry by that point.
Pastors are called to be so many things. But one of the things that the church makes them too often is a doormat. And they just get walked all over. A lighter note, being an Oklahoma boy myself and spending some time in Tulsa, how long were you in Okie?
Well, I was born there, and my family bounced around here and there. We lived in Spokane, Washington for a year when I was a kid. We lived in Detroit, Michigan for a couple of years. So my father would go and develop music ministry programs in various churches. And so, we were a little bit nomadic, but Tulsa was always our home base. And so that's where my family is. That's where home is. And so, I spent the majority of my childhood in Oklahoma, Tulsa and Broken Arrow.
Did you graduate in Tulsa from high school?
We went to a really small private Christian school. We were homeschooled for a lot of that time just because our parents did not want us in public school. They didn't believe in that at all. It had been very traumatizing for my father. He dealt with a lot of bullying and abuse, and he just didn't want us to have to go through that. And, all of the conservative Christian stuff that causes people to remove their children from public school. And then, it was a combination of homeschool and then this really tiny Christian school. So I just ended up dropping out of there, getting a GED, and then through no desire of my own, I attended Oral Roberts University in Tulsa. Where I wanted to go was UCLA, but I graduated from ORU in Tulsa.
How was ORU?
Are you wanting to talk which version of this scant are you wanting?
I got recruited to Oral Roberts to play basketball there, so I went on a tour. I think at the time I remember the prayer hands, and they were I don't know. Anyway, but I feel like they had uniforms for the.
They had a dress code, a very strict dress code. And I'm seeing Titus Jackson in the comments. Hi, Titus. He I think he lives in Oklahoma still, but we've connected on social media. But yeah, they had a very strict dress code. We had to wear dresses. We could not wear pants to class. I think a lot of that stuff has changed. The guys had to wear ties. So I think a lot of that might have changed. And I hate those students now. I'm like, how dare you guys be loping around here in your freaking slacks, as my mother used to call them. We were bound. And I always hated skirts and dresses. So, but yeah, when I was there, and it was way stricter before I came, it was even worse. It's to hear stories about people who went there in the 70s. It was crazy. But yeah, ORU, I really loathed and despised my time there, except for the friends that I made. I made some really good friendships there. But other than that, I really, 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 really hated.
Was it the classes or the? Because I went to some crazy Christian colleges too. So did you have a purity week?
You said purity ring?
Purity week.
Oh no, I don't think we had purity week. No, I think we.
What is that? The week where you don't have sex or touch yourself, or what?
No, you don't have sex ever. Purity week was where they just really drive down the shame and scare you into not having sex, so that you wouldn't do it for the rest of the year.
I knew what you meant, but Paul's description's so much better. I'm just.
Or we like to go PG-13 to R.
Yeah, quickly. Yeah, no,
Wait, can I say real quick? If nobody knows, and I've been to Oral Roberts a couple of times. There's a huge hand statue, and am I right? Those are Oral Roberts. Those are Oral Roberts hands. They're huge in the middle of campus.
Massive.
Yeah, it was one of those kind of, it's almost like being in a fever dream to visit that
Yeah.
campus. Part of it is just like, this is so bizarre, and the other part of it's like, wow, this is so fascinating, and it is unique. It's a unique campus, and so for that part of it, I think I just weirdly was like a little bit captivated. The way the buildings are, it's like
Yes.
some sci-fi version of maybe what the Celestial City is, or
Yes.
something. It's like 60s mod. I don't even know what. All the buildings are really quirky and weird. Yes, there are these huge praying hands that are modeled after Oral Roberts' hands. And then, you've got the freaking whatever Stepford Wives, some cultish kind of, environment where kids are, 19-year-olds are running around in like ankle length skirts and suits and ties and things. It's a little bizarre to think about in retrospect. But I thought I had some brilliant professors, and they were some of the first ones to kind of crack my mind open and kind of give me permission to start questioning some things that had been brewing around in my spirit for a long time. And now I look back on it and I'm like, I see what they were doing. I know what a couple of them were doing. There were certain ones that felt like it was really their job to kind of toe the line, and we got to, uphold these Christian principles and stuff. But I had an earth science professor who said, he started out the class by saying, I love Jesus, but I am not here to teach you about the Bible. I'm here to teach you science, good science. And if I'm teaching you good scientific principles, then I'm not going to teach you about creationism. I'm going to teach you about the theory of evolution. That is what we're going to talk about. And he was able to just kind of bifurcate that in his mind. And it helped me with my process at the time. I really appreciate, professors like him that really awesome. knew what they were there to do. And it really wasn't about religious programming or propaganda. And, I had other professors who really, it really was more of a propaganda issue. So I made good friends and, I actually had some good professors, but I just hated everything else.
Well, Tulsa is back in the news this week for another religious reason. Carl Lentz now lives in Tulsa, Oklahoma.
Oh, really?
From Hillsong, New York. And he took a position with at Transformation Church, which is.
Are you freaking serious?
Yeah.
Oh, that touches so many nerves right now. You have no idea. Okay.
Well, the harassment charges were never proven. They were never proven.
Okay.
Yeah. So now we've got what? We've got Carl Lentz and Michael Todd on the same church staff.
Michael Todd's the one that spit in that guy's face, right?
Yeah, but that's
as
like
a sermon illustration.
Yeah, that was probably the craziest thing that made the internet, but that's.
I know there's more.
That's pretty tame for Michael Todd.
Oh, okay. I don't want to see what's not tame.
Yeah, no, the man is like, I mean, he's a swindler for sure, and it's all about the internet fame. But of course, Carl Lentz is too. So they are either going to be a really great couple, or they're not. They're not.
How long has Carl Lentz been out of ministry? Like 2 seconds. It's been like 6 months, maybe.
Years, right?
It's been a few years.
Yeah, it's been a few years.
When he resigned.
Yeah, it was
pre-COVID. It was pre-COVID, wasn't it?
Was it pre-COVID?
Yeah.
I thought so. Dara, this may be one of those, hey, I'm a white person. Come on, black person, tell me what it's like to be black. And if it is, tell me to shut up on that question. But
I'm good at those types of questions. Go ahead.
Okay, good. I was, I started deconstructing my ideology, I think, during the Bush administration, and my theology was kind of coming along behind that. And then when President Obama got elected, first thing is, I remember the night he got elected, I just thought, I saw these, elderly black men crying on TV, and I thought, isn't this a beautiful moment? Even if your guy didn't win, isn't it a beautiful moment? And I had been asking questions already about our right-wingness as evangelicals. And then when President Obama got elected, I started going, hey, we sound pretty racist. And then of course along comes Trump. And so with I think what I've experienced with some of my friends of color is just a little bit of resentment of like, hey, white people, what the heck? What was your experience like being on the other side of that and seeing us move in that anti-Obama stuff you were talking about there, and then ultimately to Trump? What was that experience like for you, if you don't mind sharing?
Yeah, that was pretty. It was. I mean, you talk about whiplash going from Obama to Trump. I was not really around a lot of white evangelical folks at that time. I had really removed myself from a lot of that by the time Obama came around. And so thankfully I got to just celebrate that moment. I was not around people going, this is not the will of God and all of the things that my father had to put up with. But I definitely heard stories. So it was just a cool moment of thinking that maybe we were headed somewhere in 2008 that we have seemingly regressed from. And I mean, just the most joy I've ever had at seeing anyone elected when he came into office. I remember sitting there with my husband and my sister, my little sister. She's much younger than me. And so she didn't really understand the historical context. She definitely knew that there hadn't been any Black presidents before that. But I didn't, it just, when they announced that he had won, it was an emotion that I didn't even know that was there. And I just leapt out of the chair and I screamed. She turned around and looked at me like, what is going on with you? And I ran through the house and I just absolutely could not, even though we all knew he was going to win. I could not believe it. It is an indescribable thing to try to tell someone what that felt like, because there were so many people who never, ever, ever in a million years thought that would happen. So many Black folks who never thought that would happen. So to watch the backlash, and the Onion actually wrote an article right after that happened that said, and it was very prescient. It said, the next candidate, I'm phrasing this horribly, paraphrasing this horribly. Next candidate that Republicans run is just a white hot ball of rage. They were proposing that was going to be the next Republican presidential candidate. And
they weren't wrong.
It's pretty accurate, actually.
Actually, it was more like an orange ball of rage, but
Well, yeah. And in President Obama's "Yes, We Still Can" book, he said, Trump is my fault. I'm the reason Donald Trump was elected president. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, it's, we wouldn't be dealing with the overt sort of just the backlash against all of this. We wouldn't be dealing with that without Obama. I mean, we needed him, and I'm glad we had him. But yeah, we wouldn't be here without that. And so, yeah, to watch, it was more of a social media kind of experience for me, watching what happened during the Trump era, just observing, like I said, friends of my parents who were from the evangelical church, just watching the kinds of things that they were posting. There was a great falling away. I'll say it like that. There were a lot of people that I had to hide. There were a lot of people that I had to unfriend. There were several friends of mine, that called themselves or thought of themselves as being enlightened, or, I was probably the person they were referring to when they said they had, a black friend.
Black friend.
Right. That was me.
You were that token Black friend.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And we were kind of raised to be that, trained to be that. And so that's when the shakeup, of course, started to happen. And so, yeah, it's been an interesting thing to observe. And so I did before I started the TikTok thing, I did a couple of really pointed posts on Facebook where it was like, when I started to see what was happening. And, I'm sure a lot of people thought, well, what's wrong with her?
Yeah.
What's her deal? And it just opened my eyes to a lot. It was like, I'm almost glad, both my parents died in 2014. And I have to say, on some level, on this level, I'm kind of glad that they did, because that was their circle. Those were their people. I'm one generation removed from a lot of those folks, those kind of, boomer white folks who were just losing their minds and, getting behind Trump. And I don't know what that would have done to them. I don't know what it would have done to them.
I think the country, without the election of Obama, we would be on a completely different trajectory, because I think the racism and the bigotry and the hatefulness, as bad as the white evangelicals want to say that it had, that had subsided, and now we love everybody and all those kinds of things. It very much came to the forefront and became very obvious through the Obama years, kind of like what Paul was saying. But imagine if we had a John McCain or somebody like that, or a Mitt Romney, I guess, in 2012. I think what would have happened is I think evangelicals were kind of in the pot of water that was slowly getting turned up just a little bit at a time.
Mhm.
And I think over time we would have all just been consumed with what we see now. I think a lot of us who started to see that because of the Obama years, the mess and the racism, I think we would have been so numb to it that we would have been slowly, and I would hope that's not true, but I mean, I think we probably would have been slowly taken into it. I think the jolt that President Obama gave was the wake up call for so many people to go, because I had been in those prayer meetings too. I sat in a prayer meeting where a pastor prayed for the death of Obama, while he was in office.
Mm.
And I just thought, I don't care what your politics are. This is disturbing.
Yeah.
And so I think that quick change made a lot of us jump out of the pot, if that makes sense, and go, no, we're not going to sit here and get boiled with y'all. And so I think there is some positive that came out of it, for sure, but it certainly showed the true colors of so many.
Yeah, I think it just kind of shook some stuff loose that was clearly there. I mean,
it was there.
It was a part of the whatever, the pot. It was in the pot, and it's began to rise to the surface. We're just getting to kind of skim that, or get a good look at that, the fat content. That was in the soup, but it was always a part of the dish.
No, that been in there.
I feel like so many white evangelicals, in my circles too, were really riding the "we don't see color" train.
Yeah.
For so long, and then when Obama was elected, they had to see color. It was like, oh no, we're forced to see color now. And then what we're seeing, we don't like, because apparently we are racist, even though we would never admit we were, because we have a black friend. But sadly, you said you were kind of glad that your parents didn't see Trump be president. I feel a little bit similarly about my dad, because my dad passed in 2011, but for different reasons, because two things would have happened if he had lived. He would have either gone with the nationalist train and been on the Trump train, which would have wrecked our relationship and would have been terrible, or he would have lost all of his community because he would have he would have not voted for Trump. And I hope it's the latter, but there's the former keeps me up at night of I just don't know.
I think part of the way I started seeing this as racist, and back me up on this, April, there's no way any evangelical I knew would have ever voted for a Mormon for president, ever, because we don't believe they're Christian. We believe they're a cult, except when a Mormon is running against a black man. Suddenly it's okay for a Mormon. Suddenly we love Mormons and want them. There's no way a James Dobson would have approved of Christians, of evangelicals, let me say, getting behind a Mormon, except that he was running against a black man. Am I wrong in that, April?
Yes, I would say generally overall, I was convinced that actually I really liked Obama when I think I saw him being interviewed. It might've been by Oprah. It was some interview early on in his 2008 campaign. And I remember saying to someone at my church, I don't remember who it was, but I was like, I really like him. He seems really personable. And this person looked at me and said, well, the devil comes as an angel of light. I was like, oh, so then like I couldn't trust my own instincts, and I was like, oh, I only like him because he's being used of Satan as this like, it's so stupid. Just the hoops. I mean, I knew people that legit thought Barack Obama was the Antichrist.
Yeah.
Well, and
Well,
I think
when he made a speech at the Democratic National Convention, I think in 2004, was it?
Mhm.
I remember he blew it out of the park, and it was like, oh, that guy's good. And that's when he first hit on the scene. I remember that.
yeah, it was like Kareem Jeffries' speech at the
House
yeah,
speaker vote.
Yeah, the speaker vote. I mean,
the million votes of them.
Hakeem.
Yeah, Hakeem Jeffries. And I think it's one of those moments where you're like, you're going to remember when that guy gets where he's going, you're going to be like, oh, I watched that speech. But I think there's something really interesting in this conversation that sticks out to me. It is, and it kind of goes back to something Dara was saying earlier about the option to stay quiet and complicit versus then becoming outspoken and kind of alienating yourself from your tribe in a lot of spaces. I think we would be remiss if we didn't reflect on the fact that, especially those of us who are a part of the white community had that option to just stay silent and to blend into the room, right? Like we did not have to be the face of the change or the challenge. Like we could just walk in and pretend like everything's cool and just not talk politics or not talk about racial issues or whatever. And I think that's something that we have to seek reconciliation for, because and that we have to continue speaking out for, because I think for too long we sat quietly by. It's easy for us to go, well, look at the Christian nationalists, look what they did. But so many of us were complicit in it for so long that it got it to the point where it is now. And I know that's devastating to me to think about that, and it breaks my heart to realize that as much as I hate what American evangelicalism is today, we played a part in it.
Yeah, and that's why we're here.
I think it's very possible to just be comfortable for too long. It's just nothing's going to change unless you become uncomfortable. And I think the Trump era has made a lot of people uncomfortable, and it forces you to make a decision. And so that's the era we're in now. There's nothing in that we're experiencing now that didn't exist before, but a lot of people have become uncomfortable. And so now, there's a war raging that, of course, a lot of Black folks saw already.
Yes.
But we would have never been able to tell our white friends that this existed. It's just one of those things it's nameless and it's invisible, much like racism itself. You can scream and yell to the mountaintops about it, but unless someone really has that, put in front of their face, and
right, they're
not going to see it.
Because I think like we're taught that racism is white hoods and, like violent crimes. And so obviously, oh no, I'm not racist. I don't hurt people. I don't kill people. Right. But like, they don't realize like, no, like it's so ingrained that like your thoughts are racist. You just don't realize you're having just racist thoughts because it's just so ingrained in the culture. And that's harder to unpack because it's you. It's internal to be bias. Like, well, I'm not those people. I'm good. Like, I'm nice to people of color and I treat them well, but it's like, yeah, but you still have these like really backwards ideas and beliefs about just society as a whole.
It's like my friend the one day saying there's poverty in the Black communities because of the fatherlessness, and it's like, so and I just looked at him and said, so are you saying there is a class of people in America that don't understand family like you do? They're just not quite as attuned to family, or could there be systemic issues involved. So yeah, I think we hear these mantras so long, we don't even realize they're absolutely racist mantras.
Yeah,
Right.
it's rooted, I think, with a lot of that kind of thinking. It's so rooted, as you're saying, in truly, deeply racist thinking. But because it has been so commonly accepted, you don't really question. I think there's just a lot of these folks are famous for evaluating things up to a point. They evaluate things to the level or the depth that it suits their worldview. And then they just stop evaluating. They just stop asking the questions. And it's like, well, yeah, you're partly there. You went about 20% into the depth of this issue. Now let's just keep asking questions. Let's keep burrowing down. But it stops, because if you burrow down any further, you start running into some uncomfortable realities. And it's sometimes hard to get them to, okay, let's think a little more deeply. Okay, well, then why is that? Okay, well, then why is that? And then go back even further and really understand the issues in totality. It's just such a popular thing to stop at that 20% and just like, okay, now here, I have a narrative that tells the story that I want presented.
Yeah.
Takes an open heart. Yeah. I wanted to ask along those lines, but a little bit different, Dara. Have through history white singers like Elvis and the Beatles stolen black music?
Mm.
That's a good
I think I know the answer, but
come on.
I get in so much trouble when I talk about Elvis. And someone tagged
People
me
love Elvis.
I know. Somebody tagged me in an Elvis thing. He took a video that I did on Elvis, and my hair was completely different. So you can tell how long it's been since I really delved into that. But then I got to see the, just World War III in the comments section again. But I am a musician, and so I tend to balk a little bit at words like stealing when it comes to music or to art. Simply because I know how much musicians affect and impact and borrow from each other.
Influenced,
yeah. I'm probably not going to be like, well, you stole this and you stole it, but I've done many videos on how racial politics and racial dynamics and just the history of race and racism in this country has impacted the development of music. I have a video; it's a big 14-minute opus called "Who Invented Rock and Roll." And it takes you carefully, step by step. This is lives on my YouTube channel, but it takes you through just the history of boogie woogie and jump blues and all of these different types of music that sort of coalesced and came together to make what really constitutes popular music or early rock and roll. And so, that's a kind of a complex question. Did Elvis steal black music? Elvis definitely heavily pilfered black music. And
he didn't steal it. He just pilfered the entire village of it.
He plundered and pillaged.
Yeah, he plundered and pillaged.
But to a degree, if racial dynamics are not a factor, then Elvis did what all musicians do, which is just to heavily borrow. And I get in trouble for using that word borrow related to white musicians taking black music, but he heavily borrowed from black music. Yes, he did. And, if you look up a singer named Roy Hamilton, who's a black man, you will hear where Elvis's voice came from. And if you look up Otis Blackwell, you're going to hear where Elvis's voice came from. And then, of course, all the many musicians that he pulled from to create his sound. So his sound came from black people, if that's what you're asking. Whatever word you want to assign to that, it's up to you.
I think we defined it pretty well as piracy.
Well, and I really appreciate that honest answer of like, well, of course, singers are influenced by each other, but I've always sort of heard that idea. And I was watching a Boys to Men documentary the other night, and they were talking about how sometimes in that era, the difference between R&B and a pop song was a white person saying the pop song and a black person saying R&B, and it was it put on the other chart. And so I know it has always been, like everything in America, a racial battle over it.
Yeah, it's a highly racialized music. The music industry is highly racialized, and they have always been able to create these kind of musical ghettos. And back in the day, it used to be called Black music used to just be called race music, and it was segregated and segmented in the same way that Black people themselves were segregated and segmented off from white America, and they were just kind of deemed unfit to be played on mainstream radio stations. And so, yeah, there's a long history of disenfranchisement and hurt and all kinds of things that impact and affect that conversation. So it's not just as simple as saying, oh, well, he just was, he was raised around Black people and he just liked that music and he just did what he loved to do. It's like, well, it's a little bit deeper than that. I don't really actually fault Elvis that heavily. I have grown up as an Elvis fan. I loved him growing up. But the deifying and the idolizing of him, I don't get down with that. And I think it's important to understand that he's anything but original.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Well said.
Well, we appreciate you guys hanging out with us. I think we got a fun segment coming up, right?
We do. Do you want to just go right into it?
Yes, I'm good either way. We can run a mid roll. We don't have to run a mid roll.
Let's just roll into it. Let's just roll right into it. It's 10:04. Okay, so we had talked about something fun we could do to say something that we enjoyed or used to like or participated in or do when we were evangelical or when we were still in the church that would now be problematic in some way that we don't do now. And then the flip side of that, or something that we weren't allowed to do or we wouldn't let ourselves do because we thought it was bad or wrong or whatever, that we enjoy now. So I don't know if anyone wants to go first. I'll say something that I used to enjoy that I feel is problematic now is like going to an unaffirming church, like a white evangelical unaffirming church. Like I could not do it anymore. I feel like personally convicted that I don't know that I would enjoy it anyway, because, they don't agree with my partner exists. So that's one. Anyone else have anything?
I voted for George Bush twice. I wouldn't do that again.
That's true. I used to vote Republican.
But I am proud to say I voted for President Obama twice. So I do feel good about that.
I wish I could say that.
Yeah. I not to jump in again, but there's a whole lot of 80s movies that I loved that now are like really problematic. And so it's not really tied to evangelicalism, but like, a movie like 16 Candles was on recently and I popped it on and there's a full on date rape in the movie. It is just the date rape of a guy.
And they don't condemn it in the film. It's just
she ends up loving it. She ends up being happy that it happened, and a drunk girl being given by her boyfriend to Anthony Michael Hall, and I'm like, ooh, yeah, I can't watch this movie and enjoy it anymore.
Oh my God! Well, that's pretty heavy.
I've never seen that movie.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too. I was like,
it's such a good movie too. It's so sad, but no.
That describes half the old movies that I grew up loving. I love them so much, and then you turn them on, and it's like, oh God, I have to deal with things that would not have even occurred to me before as being problematic. Yeah, I would say just in general. I would say April. I would say church in general. It makes me really sad. I watched a feed of, my grandmother's church, which is still going. Her children are still running the church, and they had brought in an evangelist that we grew up, just loving. He was very dynamic. And I watched just a little bit of that feed, and I thought, this just feels like another world. This feels so strange to me to watch, and I can't even imagine physically being there. What would I be doing? What because it's a real, down home holiness Pentecostal church, and folks are running around and they're dancing and they're shouting and they're getting hands laid on and falling out and all kinds of, they're getting prophecies and, just any and everything's going on. So I'm like, what would I what would I be doing
Yeah.
if I were there? I can't even imagine what I
Yes.
physically would be doing. And I feel like that's, it's created a certain separation from a big segment of my family.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I hate to be a downer. I think this was
No,
supposed to
No.
be fun.
No, you-
but
I think that's great.
No, it is weird
That's a
because
good answer.
I'd always imagined too, like raising my kids in church because I was raised in church,
Yes.
and it's weird not doing that. And I'm not like opposed to going to if I found like an affirming place that was for all the right things. But yeah, it's definitely, yeah, I agree with you. It's like weird feelings. I think I asked you this before when we were doing a panel, but did your church have the modesty cloths for when you got slain in the spirit? For the
Oh yeah,
women?
they had those in the charismatic wing of the churches that we were in. Yeah, they had the regular class. My grandmother's church, which is like I said, was just straight up holiness. They had sheets, and they would wrap people up in the sheet because these women would just this is wild stuff. They're some of them are spinning around and getting rid of demons or whatever they're doing, and so yeah, they would get giant sheets and wrap them up, and it got pretty wild. Yeah, but at our charismatic church, it was just so orderly and so organized. Because it was very white. And so the pastor would lay hands and they would always have a catcher there. And they would very slowly and methodically fall back directly towards the catcher, conveniently. Like no one would ever collapse sideways. Ever.
Right.
It would just be like, I'm going to go in this direction. And someone would very, gingerly place the cloth on the women's legs. So
yep. I would get a modesty cloth. Sorry, I was gonna say they would put one on me, like even if I was wearing jeans. It was like every female got a modesty cloth, regardless of what they were wearing.
Yeah, I've seen that where they would fall out and they're in pants, and they would put the little cloth at over their ankles.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, what is that? Why?
Our liability carrier, I think I've told this story on here before, told us that we were required to have catchers if we had an assumption that people were going to fall down, because if somebody got hurt, and we'd always be, the Holy Spirit will keep them from getting hurt. But they told us if somebody got hurt. Although I did once pray for a woman, and she did not fall nicely backwards. She went down like a sack of potatoes. And, and we were in a school cafeteria at the time, and I heard her head hit the floor. Bam! With a bounce, like this ugly thud. I thought, oh my God, she's dead. We just killed her. Yeah.
She just went straight.
Oh man, I could tell you
she just went straight down.
I could tell you some stories of stuff that happened in my grandmother's church. There was a woman who went through a window. Her head went through a pane of glass. So yeah, there were absolutely no considerations of insurance or liability or anything in that environment.
Oh my gosh.
Titus here saying dudes never got a modesty cloth.
No,
they didn't. It was just like, it's so stupid.
My environment was very different.
Yeah, Jeremy's over there squealing in Baptist.
We were lucky if people would get out of their seat while we sang "Standing on the Promises of God." Like it was like the Frozen Chosen for sure.
Yeah.
But and that was this whole other thing, right? Like everybody just sat there, like nothing happened. Like people wouldn't clap in a few of the churches that I grew up in, or a couple of the churches I grew up in, and a couple that I served at. Like people wouldn't clap after like special music, because that would be worship to that person instead of to God. So you weren't supposed to offer them, a clap of praise because so it was pretty wild. I'll tell you, one thing that I enjoy now, that I'm outside of evangelical space. Yeah, exactly. Yes. Very, very, very Frozen. But one of the things I enjoy now is like some of the shows and stuff that I wouldn't watch before. Like for example, I first started watching House of Cards when it first came out. And I got a few episodes in, and there were some risque scenes, in there. And I was like, I can't.
It was the whole show.
I was going to say House of Cards can be your answer for both, because of Kevin Spacey is also problematic.
Yes, Kevin Spacey is problematic. That's true. God dang it! Now I got to decide. Why'd you
Sorry
do
to-
that?
sorry to
I
jump in
totally
there,
forgot
Jeremy,
about that. Yeah. No, but no, there was. Listen, it was absolutely no worse than Game of Thrones, Paul.
Oh, for sure, for
Oh
sure.
no,
But
Game of Thrones is
Yeah, and so anyway, all of that.
I'm sharing
you
in
know,
your experience because House of Cards was like X-rated in my mind when I first
yes,
started.
yes. And so I just remember I was like, I can't watch this. Like the Holy Spirit doesn't want, I don't need to put, garbage in, garbage out spiritually. Like I can't allow this to happen. And then now it's just, I really enjoy it. But now I've been reminded, thank you, April, that Kevin Spacey is problematic. So now I've got to go search my feelings and figure out which one of those I'm going to go with. I appreciate that. One thing that I cannot appreciate that I used to love as someone who, Dara, you actually mentioned this as when you were talking about like people who are allies or wanted to be allies to their black friends or their, the friends of color, like, you mentioned them only going like 20% and saying, oh, got the work in, like I'm there now. And really they haven't changed much. I remember that I loved like movies like Remember the Titans, right? Just thought it was an epically great movie. And it was, listen, I went for my 13th birthday to see it. Like, so there's some nostalgia, I guess, with it as a kid. Right. But now I look back at it and I go, as I've had to go into those spaces that challenge my comfort. And I actually was just preaching about this on Sunday, talking about that we've intentionally developed our staff to where I am in the minority on our board and on my staff. And that's intentionally done that way. Not only from a gender perspective, but from a sexuality perspective, and from a race perspective. And, I look at that now and I'm like, golly, like these Disney movies about like racial reconciliation were just like white savior pieces. And it was just so
like The Blind Side.
Yeah, like The Blind Side, or what was the one about the Texas Western basketball team, Glory Road?
Yeah.
Right. Like they played it up real big. Like the coach was the guy that was the actual hero, or whatever. And then even in Remember the Titans, they spun it where the white dude was, he's the one who drove the nail in the reconciliation coffin. He's the one that brought the community together or whatever. And it was just like, man, I cringe. I cringe at a lot of that stuff now because it's, because it's like it's inadvertently racist. Like it is subconscious racism.
Yeah. I found a I don't know why I'm bringing this up. I just want to know what y'all think, if this was good or bad. I found an old like church bulletin from my church that I went to in the 90s. That was just like in one of my teen Bibles that I still had. Like I just shoved it in there. And one of the little bullet points was like, next Sunday is Racial Reconciliation Sunday. Please bring a friend of another race.
Oh my God.
Oh,
And I was like, which to be fair, this was a pretty diverse church. I mean, it was still mostly white, but it was diverse for the area. But I was just like, was this like progressive for the time or bad?
17 people called Dara because she is their only black friend.
Like, how do you even make that ask? Like, hey, doing Racial Reconciliation Sunday.
Oh man,
you look different than me. Why don't we go together?
Drag some poor unsuspecting soul to white church service.
Would you come and be my black friend? Yeah.
Right.
Will you come and be my black friend?
Oh.
You can vouch for me.
Yeah.
Don't you guys? I mean, isn't like, gosh, this may be terrible for me to say, but like Bodie Bachman, like isn't he every Baptist black friend now? Like I'm okay because I listen to Bodie Bachman.
He is the Candace Owens of the SBC. Yeah. That's exactly what he is. He is the Candace Owens of the SBC. He's the problematic person who, is just a puppet to the hyper conservative.
Yeah, and the sad thing is that when you are this is a black man, I'm assuming that you all are talking about.
Yes.
Yeah, the sad thing is that when you make yourself into it's such an alluring thing, I have to say. I mean, I don't think my family, my parents ever played into that, in that sort of hardline way. But I think when you have people that do that kind of just take that on as their identity, I'm the black guy who will just say what other black people won't. I'm going to confirm all of your preconceived notions about black people and the tone policing of black people, and just I'm gonna be the as you said, the puppet who just says all the stuff that you couldn't say as a white person, but I can say it as a black person, and I'm gonna just be that voice for you. When you decide to take on that role as a black person, you can't step out of line. Is the thing. The minute that you decide to have your own thoughts or challenge those white folks in any way, your position is lost. It's a very conditional position that you hold, because when you no longer perform that service of being that puppet, they will throw you away so fast. Wow. I mean, you're gone. You are out. You are a poison. You are an infection that needs to be gotten, expelled. And so it's if you just want to cast your lot in that particular direction, and it's alluring. I'll have to say, I speak from a black person's point of view, who grew up in environments where we were expected to be the good black people. It is somewhat alluring to have a lot of white folks patting you on the back and saying, "Good, well done, good job. If only they were all like you."
If they were all like you.
They were only all like you. Yeah. Then, imagine where we would be. And they just need to hear your message. And
if they were all like you. Oh
yeah, you've got something that they need. And so just keep doing what you're doing. It's alluring. It really is. And if you want to play into that, you are, you're playing a risky game, but I understand why some black folks get caught up in that, that game, because there's a lot that they get out of it.
Well, and on the other side of the coin, in that you talk about it being an extremely dangerous place. Then you also put yourself in a position where, like a Candace Owens, it came out this week that, she had spoken down, made some very ableist comments about disabled people. And, but then it came out that she had also called out the American Book Publishing Association for being racist for not promoting her book appropriately.
Oh, stop it.
And I'm like, you took your own voice away. It may very well be racial, but you took your own voice away by throwing, like you said, casting your lot in and stepping in line with the hyper-conservative white gang.
Yeah. That's unbelievable. I hadn't even heard that. I heard the ableist thing that she said, which was just unconscionable. I can't even get my head around why she would have made those comments. But yeah, for Candace Owens, and the trip about Candace Owens, the reason I say that it's a very calculated position that some black folks take to be that, that token black person that speaks for white people, is because she was something else. I mean, she was not this. She was not a conservative before. I mean, what was it, 2018 or something that she made the pivot? She was doing. She had sued. I'm trying to remember what organization that she had sued for racism against. I feel
like it was her old high school or something that she sued. Yeah.
And she was kind of a standard, slightly liberal voice and was just doing what she was doing. But then, you can get a lot of, she had a come up that was really fast, and it just helps you see, like, they're looking for those voices, conservative white folks are looking for some well-spoken black folks that can toe the line and can be that mouthpiece. So if you're willing to be that, like, you're going to stand out and you're going to be a star way quicker than you would if you align yourself with left-leaning folks.
And when I look at, sorry, Dara, when I look at her, just like you're saying, I keep thinking, wow, when they discard you, Candace, it's going to be really ugly. Yeah,
it will be. It would be. I mean, I don't know how long she plans to kind of toe this line, but yeah, if you got to know there are some real tight parameters there, and you better not get too saucy with improvising at all, because you got a script that you have to follow, and they'll love you as long as you do.
You think she sleeps well at night?
Yeah, I think you have to turn off something in yourself. I think something has to be seared in your consciousness to do what she's doing. So yeah,
disassociate almost.
Yeah. I think that there has to be something. I saw a slight interview with a brief interview with Laura Ingram's brother, who is gay. And he said he gets asked a lot, how he turned out, how he did, and then she's who she is. And then he talked about their upbringing, and the tie. He said, like, we were basically raised by a neo-Nazi, and she just absorbed so much, and they were just denied love. And just when you hear the backstory, it's like, oh, well, that makes total sense. So I would be quite interested to hear what her upbringing was like, what kinds of people she was raised by, and the kinds of experiences that shaped her. Because there's gotta be something that's dead somewhere in you to do what she does. And it's probably a pretty deep story. Yeah. She aggravates my spirit. I can't even tell you how deeply she aggravates my spirit.
Well, and anytime I would speak out about like racism or whatever, I'd have all these white people from my church sending me Candace Owens videos. And I'm like, well, here's it from a black woman. And like, okay, you're picking one black woman. Like, I'm listening to like hundreds of other black people. Like, I'll listen to the majority over your one.
Well, but I think
like I said, my brothers would send me the Vody Bachman videos. Yes.
Yeah. But they have found a place where they are not, their voices aren't drowned out by the majority, right? That they are a token. They're the token, and therefore they're valuable. And like, I know specifically for Candace Owens, and I'm sure Vody Bachman has too, but Candace Owens has cashed in. Like, she has cashed in on book sales, on on deals with Daily Wire and everything else. I mean, she has made this profitable. But what is it? Profit a man to gain the world,
and lose his soul. Yeah, that's like you're saying. It would be hard it's like the allure of some black folks who intentionally go to white churches. And I'm not saying that a black person who goes to a white church has necessarily ulterior motives, but I know that there tend to be certain types of white folks who go to all black churches and black people who go to all white churches. It's like they enjoy being this person that stands out. They don't like the feeling of not being special. It's like immediately that provides you with some elevated status. People are gonna notice you. And so, yeah, what are the chances that Candace Owens would be a star if she were on the other side of the aisle? There's probably zero chance.
Yeah. If I could jump back in on the ending topic we had there, one thing that I do that I could never do as an evangelical is fucking cuss, and I fucking love it. I fucking love it.
There we go. Explicit all the way.
Happy.
I got one in earlier, so
I need to get my deliverance in that area. I keep saying that I'm going to start, but I just can't bring myself to it.
Oh, Dara, it was so bad. Beecher came home like a couple years ago during the pandemic. It had just read this article. That's my spouse. That people who cuss like are more at peace with themselves and just like live longer. So we can't cuss. Like, we deconstructed it. We just couldn't do it. So we just like sat there one night and practiced cussing, and we tried to see how many we could put in a sentence. And we were so bad at it. Like, comically, it was really sad and terrible. We have improved since then. It was a couple years ago, but you just need to practice.
My wife used to watch Veep while I was going to sleep. She would watch Veep at the end of the day to sort of wash, if you've ever seen Veep. And they say the F-bomb every third word. And I would be laying there in bed going, my God, turn this thing off. This is horrible. But now I just love it so much. And I partially love it. No, I a great deal love it because it makes Christians so uncomfortable. And about a pastor swearing. And then I will say, I wish you cared about human beings about a third as much as you care about dirty words. We're so attuned to dirty words, but but we don't care
I just like
about
Jimmy in
human
the
beings.
chat said that, Paul, you're the R-rated Mr. Rogers.
That's pretty good.
You need to put that in your Twitter bio.
That's
I like that.
really
You're
good.
right.
R-rated
You know, the
Mr. Rogers.
other thing I saw in the comments here in the live feed is worship music, like people saying, I can't listen to worship music anymore.
Mm.
And I actually had this experience the other day where a song popped up on my Spotify or iTunes or something. And it was an old worship song that I loved so much back in the 90s. And it just, for a second, it just hurt so much. It was so triggering to hear it. And then I finally just said, screw this. Like, they don't get to steal this experience from me.
Yeah.
You know, fuck them. Excuse my language, but they don't get to steal it. And I found myself for the first time in a long time saying, I'm going to lean in to what I can feel from this song, even though I find the church that produced it problematic. I still have my experience with the divine through this.
Mm-hmm. Music is the way that I stay connected. I think that's been like, there's just a direct, all of the junk falls away unless we're talking about a song that's lyrically problematic. That's another thing I would say that's been difficult to deal with. Is like some of the music that I actually did love is just like, once you actually stop and listen to the lyrics, like, what did he just say? Oh God, no, we can't do that. And then you got to turn it off.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we are well past time, which has been wonderful.
Yes.
But Dara, tell everybody where they can find you.
On all socials, I am Dara Starr Tucker. That's Dara with one R, Star with two. Instagram, I'm Dara Tucker B. And I've been trying to get that changed, trying to get my label to help me change that for a couple of years, and it just still hasn't happened. So I'm Dara Tucker B on Instagram, but I know Dara Starr Tucker everywhere else.
Awesome. And I'll put that link in the show notes. Thank you so much for chatting with us tonight.
Yeah.
Thank you all for having me. I don't know if any of this was anything at all. I feel like I've just been kind of yakety-yakking, but it's good to fellowship with like-minded people.
Yes. No, I think it was a great conversation. And sometimes those conversations just kind of around the dinner table, or I guess the Zoom room, as it were in the 21st century, are some of the best and the most impactful. And I appreciate your insight tonight for sure.
I think so. Where are you in Oklahoma, Jeremy, if you don't mind my asking?
Not at all. I am in the 405. I'm in Oklahoma City.
Oklahoma City. Okay.
Yeah.
So,
are you still, well, I guess if you don't mind my asking, you are not in Oklahoma anymore. I think you mentioned earlier.
I was Nashville for, like I said, about 13 years. And then I moved to New York for a couple of years. And my husband's job brought us he's a radio broadcaster. So his job brought us to Philly. So he's on the jazz station here in Philly, WRTI. And he's also with Sirius XM. So that's why we're here. I never would have thought I'd be in Philadelphia. It was no reason for me to ever come here, but here I be. So
do they still have DJs?
They do, especially on jazz radio. Yeah, they do.
Yeah.
They're the last of the dinosaurs, but it's a pretty hot field right now for some reason.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, I DJ'd in high school. It was my dream job. And so I didn't even know they had DJs anymore. They just have the guys who do the liners and stuff and all of that crud. So I'm glad to hear somebody's still doing it. So tell me that's awesome.
Yeah, everything is like, it's obviously pre-recorded and dropped in a lot of stations, not all of them, like you said, jazz. And then I think obviously sports radio hangs on just because people still enjoy being able to drive down the road and listen to the game or, whatever.
Radio,
and so, and talk radio in general. Yeah, I guess like an NPR or whatever as well. That's a good point. But yes. Well, that's very cool. Paul and I have mutual admiration. We both had some radio experience as well. So we can appreciate that for sure.
Yeah, it's I'm in admiration of those folks. I told him, I'm like, I talk for a living, but I would not know what to do if you put me on the air. We're like, I could play the music, but I wouldn't know what to say. Just like, here's I don't know, you guys, I really like this album. Please listen to it. I would not know how to get into the cadence of it. So I'm in awe of them.
Awesome.
I suspect you would figure it out.
Yeah, quickly. You'd figure it out quickly.
And you have a super cool jazz voice. So I think you do. I think you're missing
You do,
out.
especially about 11:30 at night. Like get just like, you know, like real low tone, sultry. Like, I mean, I could see it. I can already feel it.
I need a script and a teleprompter and an editing software. That's where I shine.
Listen, don't threaten me with a good time. I'll send all of that to your house tomorrow.
In fact, I'm sorry to elongate for that, but if you ever want just like a movie out of nowhere, get The Warriors. Have you ever seen Warriors, the gang movie from New York? There is a female DJ through the whole movie who sort of narrates the movie through, and you sound just like her. So get Warriors. It's a really good movie, and
I will look that up.
Yeah, you'll like it.
Awesome. Well, we appreciate Dara coming on and joining us this evening. And as always, we appreciate each and every single one of you amazing listeners out there, the Evangelicalish community. We couldn't do this without you. Do us a favor, go to evangelicalish.com. That's evangelical with an ISH. And you can join the Ish community. You can join our secret society of end times villains. We would love for you to join us there. There are different options and levels for whatever is best for your budget, but we would so greatly appreciate that. You get behind the scenes content, as well as some chat boards, and folks on the top two levels get a bi-monthly Zoom. So go join that. Go follow us on all the socials. We're on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, of course, and YouTube here where you're at this evening if you're listening live. So otherwise, appreciate y'all hanging out with us tonight. Appreciate Dara again. For Dara and April and Paul, I'm Jeremy. Good night.